So this first article talks about how peace is not just the absence of war. It goes a little bit deeper, and it explores that concept utilizing this case of Abuja in Nigeria, which teaches us about workplace conflict, or we can infer how to handle workplace conflict from this study. So the first one is, what is the relationship between Christian and Muslim communities in Abuja? I may be messing that up. Nigeria, and basically the author of the study followed a specific research method of structured and unstructured interviews. He lived in this specific district of Abuja for a few months to document the responses of numerous stakeholders in this community. So it seems like he used both qualitative and quantitative data collecting as a way to kind of see what was going on here, using experiences as well as interviewing people, using the purposive sampling method. He interviewed over 90 people. Some people were religious authorities, some were lay believers, between the ages of about 20 and 65. And now if you want to go to the next slide, that would be perfect. Okay, this district is considered to be the most peaceful and safe district in Nigeria, and so it receives a lot of attention from the federal government. While it is a relatively peaceful part of Nigeria, things are not great. It hasn't received a lot of the or experienced a lot of the same brutality and violence that other parts of Nigeria have experienced. But there are inter-religion and intra-religious divisions, fears, suspicions, stereotypes, biases against different groups or opposing groups. There's also a lack of confidence in the state, a lack of trust, a lack of security and stability. And there are other threats to the somewhat stable, or I don't want to say stable, but somewhat peaceful district, this peaceful district in Nigeria. And some of those things are, like I said before, extreme poverty, social media, elections also can stir up peace divisions or divisions in countries. Political conflicts also can exacerbate these tensions between two groups. And there have also been external threats, so threats coming from other parts of Nigeria outside of this district, although there has not been some of the more characteristic brutalities that we're seeing in Nigeria today. And the key takeaway is that there are typically, in a lot of cases, underlying tensions and conflicts that are hidden, but can show up in different ways, such as in stereotypes and, as it states, in passive-aggressive ways in the workplace or in any society where violence is not a common norm or behavior. So if violence is not typically how you handle conflict, the lack of violence doesn't mean that there isn't still tensions and disagreements and things that are happening. And these can often show up in passive-aggressive ways in the workplace. And that was inferred from this study. And these tensions can often linger for a while unless management decides to intervene and ensure that there is a way to have a dialogue between the two or multiple groups that are conflicting and have more positive coping mechanisms. Passive-aggressive ways of handling conflict are not good. Like violence, obviously you don't want, but passive aggression doesn't resolve anything either. So I think this is a really interesting study, and I think it's interesting how this was inferred from religious conflicts in Nigeria. So yeah, I'll open up to discussion.
Well, it's such a great example of the difference between the presenting issue and the systemic issue, right? How systemic issues will lead to presenting issues. So just the lack of presenting violence doesn't mean that the potential for violence is gone unless we change something in the system.
I think it's also like that highlights how systemic, I mean, that's still violence, right? You're talking about like direct violence, the physical violence, war. Are any of you familiar with like the Johan Galtung's violence triangle? Right, so it's like the indirect, which is systemic violence, and then cultural violence, which is just the actions and the behaviors that we have with one another. So in the workplace, like our colleagues, like we act a certain way in order to basically perpetuate or validate the systemic violence or the structural violence, the indirect. So yeah, I always like to like remind myself of that triangle of violence, that like there's 3 different types. And a lot of times when people hear the word violence or conflict, or, you know, they just think physical, like there's something, yeah, that you can see.
Well, or if you take out the word violence and put in the word conflict, it's kind of the same triangle, right? So there's presenting issues, acute conflicts between this individual and whatever it is, and then there's a structure around them that's allowing that kind of conflict to emerge. So there's a systemic conflict or even a cultural conflict. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think this is good. This is a good example of how it's important to kind of look at all of this. And just because there's no current conflict, what's the potential for conflict based on the organizational culture and the systems that are in place?